In the final months of the Second World War, Europe was a continent of collapsing empires, stolen science, and vanishing truths. Armies advanced, but behind the smoke and rubble, entire archives were erased, convoys disappeared, and files marked classified indefinitely began their long descent into silence. Historians speak of the battles that ended the war, but few discuss the secret operations that ensured it would never truly end. What remains are fragments, coded messages, missing crates, and testimonies from men who were never supposed to exist. Each file tells of a different shadow buried beneath victory, where the war's end was only the beginning. Chapter 1. The Vanishing of Operation Paper Trail. In April 1945, as the Third Reich crumbled and the Red Army tightened its noose around Berlin, an unmarked convoy of Wehrmacht trucks departed from a bunker complex near Bad Ischl, Austria. The movement order was signed by SS Obersturmbannführer Gerhard Falken, an intelligence officer attached to the Reich Main Security Office, RSHA, under the cryptonym Euler 17. The convoy was said to carry cultural artifacts, but later testimonies from captured personnel revealed a more sinister cargo: microfilm reels containing encoded lists of Nazi intelligence assets across Europe and South America. The mission was given the internal designation Operation Paper Trail, a name that would vanish from official records within weeks of the Reich's collapse. The convoy, consisting of 5 Mercedes L3000 trucks and a single armoured Sadi Kfz 251 half-track, was last seen by local villagers near the mountain pass of Postalmstrasse. A Luftwaffe aerial reconnaissance log dated April 27th recorded smoke rising from the same area, believed to be the result of self-destruction protocols executed by the SS to prevent capture. Yet no wreckage was found. When Allied units of the US 80th Infantry Division swept through the region 2 days later, they discovered only shallow tire impressions and an abandoned fuel depot marked with the symbol of the Reichsadler. A subsequent OSS field report titled Recovery Attempt, Asset Ewell, detailed the retrieval of a coded manifest, partially burned, listing Film Roll 0106, Contact Sud, a reference to German operations in Argentina, Chile, and Paraguay. Declassified OSS telegrams from 1946 show that the Americans initiated Operation Sable, a covert search for the missing paper trail materials. Led by Major Thomas Keenan, a counterintelligence officer fluent in German, the mission aimed to locate Falken or any remnants of the Ewell 17 convoy. Keenan's field diary, later found in a private estate auction in 1972, contained several cryptic entries. One dated June 3, 1946, read simply, Hallstatt, monastery sealed, stone room beneath the nave, Kreuzmarket wissenschaftliche Aufzeichnungen, removed before arrival. That monastery was later identified as St. Agatha Abbey, whose post-war renovations revealed hidden concrete flooring inconsistent with its medieval foundations. The Soviet NKVD had also been monitoring the same region. Intercepted Soviet transmissions obtained through the British Venona project in 1948 referred to a parallel search named Operatia 10, Operation Shadow. The Soviets believed the microfilm reels contained intelligence on pre-war Soviet-German contacts and financial transactions through neutral Swiss banks. A fragment from one decoded cable between Moscow and its Vienna Residentura reads, Ensure retrieval of reels, contain names of embedded Western assets. By 1949, both the CIA, successor to OSS, and the KGB had filed the paper trail case as unsolved. What emerged in the decades following was a trail of disappearances. In 1953, Keenan was reassigned to Bonn and reportedly died in a car accident near the Rhine. His vehicle was impounded by US Army Criminal Investigation Division, but no report of the accident survives. In 1958, an Austrian archivist named Liesel Brenner published an article referencing lost Nazi microfilms in a local historical journal. 3 weeks later, her home was destroyed in an unexplained fire, the article withdrawn from circulation. The surviving proof copy, now held in a private collection, includes a note in the margin. Operation continued under new authority, Geheimdienst Südamerika. During the 1960s, Argentine intelligence quietly opened its own inquiry after rumors surfaced that former SS officers in Cordoba were using coded microfilm records to manage hidden networks of exiled personnel. The Argentine Federal Police Archives, partially opened in 1993, list multiple foreign intelligence requests referencing Earl Dossier. No official German, American, or British institution has ever confirmed their existence. Yet multiple former CIA officers have hinted that the paper trail materials resurfaced briefly during the early Cold War to assist in identifying Soviet moles in Western Europe. A retired analyst, speaking anonymously to Der Spiegel in 1981, stated, "The films contained more than names, they contained leverage." The Austrian National Archives maintains a sealed envelope labelled Euler 17, 1945-46. Its contents are classified under national security exemptions. Researchers granted limited access describe faint typewriter markings on the exterior that read, "Nicht öffnen for 2045. Do not open before 2045. Forensic imaging conducted in 2012 by independent historians detected faint outlines of a schematic, possibly a map, overlaid by military grid coordinates corresponding to the Dachstein Massif. Despite exhaustive searches, no physical trace of the convoy or its cargo has ever been recovered. Satellite imaging in 2007 identified metallic anomalies within a collapsed salt tunnel near Altosi, less than 10 kilometers from where the trucks were last seen. Austrian authorities sealed the area, citing instability. A classified NATO document leaked in 2016, titled Subterranean Recovery Zone D, included an annotation beside the coordinates, Euler 17. No official acknowledgement followed. The legend of Operation Paper Trail endures because of what it suggests, that the intelligence apparatus of the Third Reich was not destroyed, but repurposed, carried forward into the clandestine architecture of the Cold War. Historians speculate that whoever controlled the microfilm reels controlled a hidden map of post-war espionage, from the ratlines of South America to the recruitment corridors of newly formed Western agencies. For decades, whispers in intelligence circles have claimed that Paper Trail was not a failure of recovery, but a success of concealment, orchestrated by those who benefited most from the chaos of victory. Some believe the reels still exist, sealed in a vault deep within the Austrian Alps, guarded by layers of classification and political convenience. Others suggest they were destroyed long ago, their secrets traded among agencies in an unspoken agreement to erase the past. Yet every few years, another photograph surfaces. Another anonymous tip points to a buried tunnel or abandoned monastery, each promising closure, each swallowed again by silence. The paper trail remains unending, invisible, and perhaps by design unsolvable. Chapter 2. Echoes beneath the Baltic ice. In the frozen waters of the Gulf of Finland, February 12, 1945, Soviet sonar operators aboard the destroyer Stoichi detected a faint distress transmission repeating on loop. Eisvogel, position 60°14 N, 26°03 E, engines failing. The signal persisted for 7 hours before vanishing completely. Archival Soviet naval records classified the incident as false contact, but beneath the surface, the NKVD quietly initiated an inquiry under the designation Case File 7, 4 and 12, Phantom U-Boat Eisvogel. According to the surviving reports, no U-boat under the Kriegsmarine's registry bore that name or call sign, and yet the signal carried authentic German Navy encryption protocols, last used by U-479, a Type 7C submarine destroyed months earlier in the same sector. Declassified fragments from the Soviet Northern Fleet's intelligence branch reveal that divers were dispatched from Kronstadt 3 weeks later under Operation Ledyanaya Tishina, Frozen Silence. They reported finding debris fields near the submerged wreck of a cargo trawler, but also detected traces of a metallic hull far denser than typical naval construction of the era. The dive logs, recovered decades later from a classified Leningrad archive, mention a coating of strange reflective alloy, polished like glass. The divers were ordered to cease operations immediately. The following day, the entire dive team was reassigned to an inland engineering project and never returned to active service. In 1958, the story resurfaced when Finnish icebreakers conducting sonar mapping stumbled upon a massive anomaly embedded within permafrost 30 meters beneath the seabed. Measuring approximately 67 meters in length and 6 meters in diameter, the structure bore the unmistakable outline of a submarine hull. Finnish naval archives record the event briefly before classifying the file as foreign military object. Western intelligence took interest. NATO's Submarine Data Evaluation Group, dispatched observers under the cover of oceanographic research. Their internal memo, Baltic Ice Report number 24310, declassified only in 2001, described non-standard construction patterns and possible application of radar-absorbent composite layering. The same memo referenced a German experimental metallurgy program at the Peenemünde Army Research Center involving materials described as Stahlreflektoren 302b, a wartime attempt to reduce radar cross-sections. The significance was clear. Eisvogel might have been part of a clandestine test platform for stealth technology decades ahead of its time. If true, it suggested that Nazi Germany's scientific ambitions extended well beyond the known V-weapons projects. Supporting evidence came from a recovered portion of a 1944 Abwehr report found in a Berlin archive, describing an unlisted naval prototype conducting field evaluation in Arctic conditions. The document, signed by a Captain Walter Kruger, made a cryptic note. The vessel's silence is its shield. Do not lose the bird to the ice. By the mid-1960s, as the Cold War intensified, Soviet intelligence returned to the site under Operation Frostline, a classified military engineering mission disguised as a routine seabed resource survey. Recovered records from the Central Naval Archive in St. Petersburg, partially released in 2010, show that Frostline personnel conducted a series of dives in 1964 and 1965, retrieving metallic fragments, personal effects, and what appeared to be sealed canisters with embossed Reichsadler insignia. The canisters were transported to a secure facility in Kaliningrad, where all documentation abruptly ceases. An attached memo to Admiral Sergei Gorshkov, then commander of the Soviet Navy, reads, "Material classified. Relevance high. Western replication possible." From that point forward, any mention of the Eisvogel was struck from Soviet naval registries. Eyewitness accounts, however, persisted among fishermen along the Estonian coast. They told of dark shapes beneath the ice, glowing with a dull blue hue in moonlight, and occasional interference on shortwave radios, described as a ghost signal repeating fragments of German Morse code. Though dismissed as folklore, electromagnetic anomalies were indeed recorded in the region during winter months, aligning with the coordinates first mentioned in the 1945 distress transmission. British intelligence documents from 1971 included a brief reference in SIGINT file B2189, Baltic phenomena, stating that occasional coded pulses, repeating sequence Vogel 17, correspond to wartime Enigma key groups, structure consistent with Kriegsmarine use. In 1982, a joint Finnish-Swedish diving expedition, led by marine archaeologist Dr. Henrik Aaltonen, claimed to have located the wreck at a depth of 78 meters. The divers reported a narrow cylindrical craft wedged vertically in ice sediment. Its hull bore remnants of German script, partly legible, eyes, gel. The dive video, never publicly released, was seized by Finnish intelligence, citing national security concerns. Dr. Aaltonen disappeared in 1984 while travelling to Stockholm to deliver his findings to a BBC documentary crew. His suitcase, recovered from his hotel room, contained copies of blueprints and a note that read, "They sealed the vault. Leave it buried." Western analysts believe the Eisvogel project may have been linked to a broader Nazi initiative involving magnetic signature suppression and radar evasion, possibly as part of a proposed Arctic U-boat corridor between Norway and the Baltic. Peenemünde, scientists involved in advanced materials research, were later absorbed into US and Soviet programs under Operation Paperclip and its eastern counterpart. In several post-war interrogations, German naval engineers referred to Project Nebelvogel, the Fogbird, believed to have aimed at constructing submarines invisible to sonar. Yet all official documentation on Nebelvogel was destroyed by order of the Oberkommando der Marine on April 28, 1945. Theories surrounding the Eisvogel remain divided. Some historians argue it was simply a mislabeled U-boat lost to shifting ice. Others suggest it was deliberately scuttled to conceal experimental technology that later influenced stealth research on both sides of the Iron Curtain. The alloy samples recovered under Frostline, tested decades later, reportedly exhibited electromagnetic absorption properties similar to early radar-absorbing coatings developed by Lockheed in the 1970s. No country has ever acknowledged possessing them. Today, the coordinates 60°14N, 26°03 EE remain a restricted naval zone. Satellite imagery shows a circular exclusion radius maintained year-round. justified as a heritage protection area. Locals claim that during certain winters, faint mechanical noises echo beneath the ice, rhythmic, deliberate, as if engines long dead still pulse against the seabed. The last official mention of the site appears in a 1992 Russian Federation naval log, referencing legacy hazard structures, classified origin. No subsequent dives have been authorized. Whether the Eisvogel still lies frozen beneath the Baltic, preserved in its icy tomb, or was quietly extracted during the Cold War remains unknown. What is certain is that its existence and erasure bridges the thin line between documented history and the secrets nations choose never to admit. The transmission that began it all, recorded on a fading reel in the archives of the Russian Northern Fleet, still plays faintly when restored. Eisvogel, engines failing, then static, then silence, always silence. Chapter 3. The Geneva Dossiers. Project Cassandra. In the spring of 1949, a midnight train crossed the French-Swiss border under escort from uniformed guards with no insignia. Witnesses at Geneva's Cornavin station recalled the carriages, dark, windowless, and unmarked, rolling in without any customs inspection. The cargo manifest, later retrieved from Swiss Federal Archives under code CAS 49, listed only 3 entries: medical research materials, archival documents, and restricted biological samples. The operation bore no national insignia, no diplomatic cover, and no acknowledged destination. Its escort commander, identified by the false name Colonel H. Lemoyne, signed a receipt for the crates in the presence of Swiss security officers. Within hours, the entire shipment was lowered into the subterranean vaults beneath the League of Nations building, later occupied by the newly formed United Nations office at Geneva. The files would become known, decades later, as Project Cassandra. The origin of the Cassandra files traces back to the final months of the war, when Allied forces discovered abandoned research centers across occupied Poland and Czechoslovakia. Among them was a facility outside Lublin, operated by a unit with no known SS or Wehrmacht designation. The few surviving ledgers referred to it only as Versuchsanlage 9B, Experimental Installation 9B. Soviet forces who first entered the compound reported piles of burned documents and sealed steel containers containing what they described as biological test samples. American investigators arrived days later under Operation Dustpan, a cleanup effort focused on recovering German biowarfare data. The materials taken from Lublin were quietly removed from official logs, disappearing into the chain of custody that led, ultimately, to Geneva. British intelligence files released under the UK National Archives, Cab 134-2172, reveal a 1951 interagency memorandum discussing the Cassandra material in relation to radiation exposure. Experiments conducted on human subjects between 1943 and 1945. The memo refers to a combined Franco-German program under SS medical jurisdiction, conducted under the guise of public health research. The purpose was to study resistance thresholds to ionizing radiation and chemical agents, data later mirrored in early NATO medical trials and US atomic testing protocols. The paper trail is faint, but names appear in fragments. Dr. Konrad Falk, former head of SS Medical Research Division East, and Dr. Madeleine Dupont, a French biophysicist with ties to post-war NATO medical committees, both vanish from official records after 1952. In 1957, the World Health Organization established its Radiation Protection Committee in Geneva. Internal correspondence obtained from a former committee secretary mentions Cassandra reference materials held on site, implying that the WHO offices shared subterranean storage with remnants of the wartime dossiers. A Swiss parliamentary inquiry into foreign materials stored on neutral soil, launched in 1978, uncovered partial manifests suggesting that sealed lead containers labeled Cassandra A3 and Cassandra A5 were removed in the early 1950s by an American delegation under diplomatic immunity. When the inquiry requested access, the vault was empty. The corridors below the Palais des Nations were found reinforced and sealed, their original access doors welded shut. The official explanation cited structural safety measures. One of the few first-hand testimonies comes from a letter written in 1961 by Dr. Hans Keller, a Swiss archivist who claimed to have catalogued portions of the Cassandra shipment. His letter, addressed to a friend in Basel, stated, "These are not scientific files as they claim. They are accounts of atrocities, formulas written in code, and photographs that cannot be unseen. The material breathes. Keller died 3 months later from what authorities ruled a cerebral hemorrhage. His notes were confiscated by Swiss security services. When the letter resurfaced decades later, a red wax seal bearing the initials UNOG SCI was found affixed to its envelope. In 1989, investigative journalist Corinne Vautier published an exposé titled Les Dossiers Interdits de Genève, claiming that the Cassandra files contained proof of Allied collaboration in post-war human experimentation. Her article cited leaked NATO medical reports referencing radiation resilience baselines derived from previous European studies, classified pre-1945. Within a week, her publication was withdrawn under legal threat from unnamed international agencies. Vautier disappeared in 1991 while en route to Strasbourg for an interview with former WHO officials. Her car was found abandoned at a rest stop near Lausanne, her tape recorder still running. The final recorded words, they were all there. The names, Falk, Dupont, Lansing, Keene. Geneva kept them. Declassified CIA documentation from 1999, specifically File HX-221A, Medical Intelligence Europe, 1945, 55, acknowledges receipt of Axis biological and radiological experimentation data transferred through neutral intermediaries. One paragraph, heavily redacted, lists Geneva as a temporary holding site. Another notes, Cassandra compilation used in evaluation of post-war exposure tolerance. When questioned during a 2003 FOIA hearing, a CIA spokesperson denied any knowledge of the project, calling it mythical Cold War lore. However, handwriting analysis comparing Keller's surviving notes with a classified OSS report from 1946 revealed identical formatting styles and matching numerical codings, suggesting the Cassandra project originated within Allied channels from the very beginning. Historians examining the Geneva dossiers have struggled to trace their chain of custody. Some fragments, recovered from microfilm duplicates found in an abandoned Swiss archive annex, include chemical analysis tables bearing French and German letterheads side by side. Others reference US military contracts coded Medray 4, possibly related to early radiation protection research conducted at Oak Ridge. The implication is that Cassandra was not merely a collection of Nazi war crimes evidence, but a collaborative scientific archive, built to ensure that ethically indefensible research survived under the protection of neutrality. One striking anomaly exists in the WHO's 1952 internal registry, a line item labeled Historical Medical Data, RefCAS 0172 Do Not Destroy, Transfer to Custody G section. No such G section has ever been publicly identified. Yet in the United Nations' own blueprints of the Palais des Nations, an unmarked corridor extends beneath the East Wing, accessible only through service tunnels dated to pre-war renovations. Urban explorers who have entered the area illegally report sealed steel doors with embossed numbers and faded stenciling. CAS 03. As late as 2015, a leaked European Parliament briefing referenced classified public health materials under shared custody with the United Nations office at Geneva. Relevance to radiological ethics cases, period 1945-1955. When questioned, UN officials refused to comment. The document was quietly retracted within 48 hours. Researchers who attempted to trace the citation found the original file number had been reassigned. Project Cassandra remains one of the least understood legacies of the war, a convergence of medicine, secrecy, and moral compromise. Whether its materials were destroyed, hidden, or incorporated into later scientific programs, no one can say. What is known is that its disappearance coincided precisely with the creation of international nuclear safety standards, as if the data had been reborn under another name. Those who have studied the surviving fragments describe the handwriting on several pages, angular, methodical, unmistakably German, followed by neat English annotations, validated, proceed with baseline integration. Beneath one table, a single handwritten sentence in French. Les morts parlent encore. The dead still speak. Chapter 4. Red Mercury and the Odessa Legacy. In the winter of 1991, as the Soviet Union teetered on collapse, retired GRU Colonel Viktor Mikhailovich Lavrov contacted a British journalist in Vienna with a briefcase full of crumbling documents and a single claim that could have rewritten post-war history. He spoke of Operation Morgenrot, Morning Red, a covert Nazi program allegedly transferred through Odessa escape networks to Argentina in 1946. According to Lavrov, the operation involved an unstable substance known as red mercury, a compound derived from isotope research at a Dresden laboratory evacuated during the Allied bombing campaign. Lavrov's files, stamped BFS, Geheim, Federal Office for Radiation Protection, Secret, outlined post-war Soviet recovery efforts in Thuringia and described unmarked canisters bearing SS seals and the cryptic label WWII. 3 days. After his meeting, Lavrov's body was discovered in his hotel room at the Intercontinental Vienna. The briefcase was gone. The roots of the Red Mercury mystery trace back to late 1944, when the Reich's desperate leadership redirected resources from failing weapons programs to Wunderwaffen projects. Among them was a classified isotope enrichment initiative housed beneath the abandoned factory complex at Radebeul, codenamed Project Morgenrot. Soviet recovery reports later described crimson-colored, mercury-like liquid stored under vacuum-sealed quartz cylinders. Its intended use remains speculative, though declassified German scientific correspondence from 1944 between Dr. Kurt Diebner and physicist Walter Gerlach refers to a catalytic medium for plasma compression and radiant energy amplification. Allied intelligence dismissed such terms as pseudoscience, yet multiple independent witnesses, including captured scientists interrogated during Operation Alsos, confirmed that the Reich had invested heavily in unconventional nuclear research. When the war ended, dozens of SS scientists disappeared through escape routes maintained by the Odessa network, the clandestine organization that smuggled Nazi officers to South America. By 1947, Argentine customs records list shipments of industrial, chemical containers arriving from European ports under false manifests. A declassified US naval intelligence document, Report 632B, Post-War Maritime Movements, notes that one freighter, the Santa Lucia, carried cargo declared as optical glass, which upon inspection showed traces of mercury vapor and abnormal radiation signatures. The vessel's captain, an Austrian named Otto Schreiber, vanished in Buenos Aires 6 weeks later. Lavrov's documents contained photocopies of Soviet field orders from 1946, directing Red Army technical units to secure underground facilities near Dresden. One entry, signed by Major Ivan Petrov of the 9th Directorate, reads, "Recovered cylinders exhibit dangerous reactivity when exposed to air. Immediate containment recommended. Transfer to Laboratory 2, Podolsk." Soviet records confirm the existence of Laboratory 2, a classified isotope research facility operated by the Ministry of Media Machine Building. No inventory of its contents was ever released. By 1952, Moscow's atomic scientists publicly denied that red mercury existed, calling it a Western fabrication. Yet internal memos obtained by German researcher Dr. Albrecht Noll in 1994 describe compound H-Gunsid requiring stabilization by cold vacuum process, an unmistakable echo of Lavrov's claim. Meanwhile, reports from Argentine intelligence archives point to a series of clandestine detonations in Patagonia between 1946 and 1951. Locals in the Rio Negro province spoke of underground explosions that shattered windows and caused livestock deaths. Military documents uncovered decades later by investigative journalist Esteban Corral list experimental ignition chambers constructed under direction of German engineers operating from a facility codenamed Estancia Morgenrot. The blueprints bore signatures of 2 individuals later identified through immigration records as former SS engineers from Peenemünde. When the site was re-examined in 1979, soil samples revealed trace isotopes of mercury and uranium, an impossible combination unless produced through synthetic enrichment. The CIA, aware of these developments, launched its own inquiry under Project Aurora South. Declassified portions of the 1957 assessment describe continued Axis scientific continuity within Argentine industrial sectors, noting unusual Soviet interest in the same region. An intercepted GRU cable from 1960, now housed in the Mitrokhin archive, reads, Odessa remnants operate laboratory with Western assistance. Objective unclear. Suspect testing of Hg2 derivatives. The cable was marked Priority 1 and circulated directly to the KGB First Chief Directorate. No follow-up was recorded. The legend of Red Mercury gained renewed attention in the 1980s, when black market dealers began offering vials of a reddish metallic substance purported to be nuclear accelerant. Western intelligence agencies dismissed it as a hoax used in sting operations, yet internal NATO briefings reveal that chemical analysis of seized samples occasionally showed isotopic irregularities consistent with high-energy synthetic reactions. In one case, a seizure in Prague in 1989 yielded a vial emitting measurable neutron radiation for over 30 minutes before decaying into inert mercury. The Czech police investigation was sealed under orders from Soviet liaison officers still operating in country. Lavrov's testimony, though fragmented, contained verifiable elements. His handwritten notes referred to contact with Argentine intermediary Vega, location Bariloche, coordinates within 20 kilometers of former German research enclave. Bariloche, known for its large post-war German community, had long been rumored to house exiled scientists working under military patronage. In 1992, journalists exploring the ruins of an abandoned laboratory near Lago Nahuel Huapi discovered glass containment tubes shattered from within. Radiation surveys conducted by Argentine nuclear authorities recorded residual contamination consistent with isotopic mercury. The area was quietly declared restricted due to geological instability. Photographs retrieved from Lavrov's flat in Moscow, confiscated by FSB officers but leaked in the early 2000s, show a series of sealed crates stamped with both Soviet and German markings, dated 1946. A handwritten tag on one reads simply, Heung says, Morgenrot, property of Laboratory 2. The handwriting matched samples from known reports authored by Major Petrov. The implication was explosive. Both Soviet and Nazi programs had collaborated, or at least shared assets, in the immediate aftermath of Germany's surrender. In 2008, forensic chemists re-examined a surviving shard of glass from the alleged Bariloche chamber, obtained through private collectors. Under spectrographic analysis, the residue showed traces of isotope Hg2O3 stabilized with unknown binding agents. While not proof of a functional weapon, it lent weight to theories that red mercury was a prototype for high-yield plasma compression detonators, devices theoretically capable of triggering small-scale nuclear reactions without uranium or plutonium. Such research parallels later Cold War projects in both the US and USSR involving non-traditional detonation media. To this day, the Argentine government maintains that Estancia Morgenrot never existed, and official Soviet archives list all mentions of red mercury as industrial rumor. Smry, yet the disappearances tell another story. Colonel Lavrov's interpreter, Yelena Andreeva, vanished in Budapest 2 weeks after his death. The journalist he met, identified in British records only as J. Morland, left Vienna under protection, and was later found dead in Berlin in 1993 from an apparent overdose. Lavrov's widow claimed he had mailed copies of his documents to Western contacts, but no such materials ever surfaced publicly. Interpol case files list the investigation as unresolved. The final page of Lavrov's recovered notebook carries a chilling annotation in Russian. They found it. They moved it south. Below the line, scrawled in faint Cyrillic, are the words Reich nie stalsia, tolko pereshelsia. The Reich never surrendered, only relocated. Whether red mercury was a myth, a misunderstood scientific experiment, or a weapon lost to the chaos of the post-war exodus remains one of history's most haunting enigmas. But the pattern, vanished scientists, erased archives, silent governments, echoes across every war's end. In the silence between wars, someone always keeps the fire alive. Chapter 5. The Black Vault of Unit 77. In the dense forests of Lower Silesia, near the town of Walim, construction crews widening a road in 1963 struck a reinforced concrete wall buried beneath 3 meters of soil. The wall, when exposed, revealed a heavy iron hatch marked with a faded black eagle and the inscription Funkleitstelle 77, Radio Command Post 77. The Polish engineers who discovered it assumed it was an abandoned wartime bunker, one of hundreds left behind by the retreating Germans. Yet when they broke the seal and entered, they found something no one expected. Scorched reels of film, decayed logbooks written in precise Gothic script, and a sealed black steel vault bolted to the floor, its handle fused by heat. The vault bore the insignia of the Reichspostministerium, the Nazi Ministry of Post and Communications, and a date, 20 April 1945. Polish authorities quickly transferred control of the site to the Ministry of the Interior. Within 48 hours, Soviet officers from the GRU arrived unannounced and assumed jurisdiction, citing pre-existing Soviet-Polish security agreements. According to declassified Polish intelligence memos from 1991, a Soviet convoy removed 15 wooden crates from the site under heavy guard, labeling them telecommunication archives. The crates were loaded onto trucks bearing false civilian registration numbers and driven east toward Legnica, home to the Soviet Northern Group of Forces. The Polish engineer who initially led the excavation, Captain Janusz Sobczak, filed a detailed report describing film reels labeled Feindnachricht, enemy message, and ledgers recording Allied radio transmissions decrypted weeks before the war's end. His report was suppressed. Sobczak resigned 2 months later and died in a traffic collision that same winter. Surviving fragments of his notes were found in 1989 in a Warsaw attic. Sketches of a subterranean layout marked chambers labelled Hörraum, listening room, and Rechenstelle, calculation office. Scribbled in the margins, Sobczak wrote, British codes recorded February 1945. Impossible. Historians later confirmed that British naval codes were not compromised until late April, suggesting the German facility had access to encrypted Allied transmissions far earlier than officially documented. That anomaly drew the attention of Western intelligence agencies. British files declassified in 2005 under the title Project Ashfield reveal that MI6 dispatched a liaison officer to Poland in 1964 under diplomatic cover. The officer, Major Robert Fielding, filed a memorandum noting that Unit 77's recovered film reels contained partial Allied communication decrypts bearing British call signs. The presence of such material implied either a leak within the Allied code network or an independent German decryption breakthrough. Fielding's final dispatch to London, dated November 12, 1964, reads, "The material cannot be explained by conventional cryptographic methods. Suggests foreknowledge of cipher rotation keys. Possible infiltration at high level." 3 weeks later, Fielding's body was discovered in a Warsaw apartment. The autopsy cited respiratory failure due to chemical exposure. MI6 closed the file citing accidental death during foreign assignment. For decades, Unit 77 vanished into rumour. Local villagers claimed the bunker was resealed and guarded by plainclothes officers who conducted nightly inspections. Some spoke of a low hum emanating from underground during storms, as if dormant machinery had awakened. In 1972, Polish military engineers revisited the site to install power lines. Their photographs, later leaked to journalists, show rows of radio consoles melted by intense heat and a central chamber containing an array of magnetized reels mounted on brass fixtures. The equipment bore serial plates from Telefunken AG, dated 1944, consistent with advanced signal processing prototypes used for high-speed decryption work. According to internal Warsaw Pact communication logs, Soviet cryptographic specialists conducted detailed analysis of the recovered materials between 1963 and 1968. One classified summary refers to potential Allied code prediction capability through signal, harmonics and time drift detection. If true, this would suggest that German engineers had experimented with frequency phase patterning, a primitive precursor to modern predictive decryption. The archive might have contained mathematical models of Allied cipher rhythms, derived through intercepted traffic analysis rather than direct code breaking. In essence, Unit 77 may have mapped Allied communication behavior rather than its literal content, an intelligence advantage few could have imagined in 1945. Western analysts believe the British and Americans became aware of the Soviet recovery shortly thereafter. A CIA report titled Silesian Technical Archive, intercept source, declassified in 2017, acknowledges loss of sensitive communications intelligence resulting from 1945 facility discovery. The same report notes that NATO established an internal task force to assess potential exposure of early Cold War cipher frameworks derived from WWII systems. The tone of the document is unmistakable: alarm. Somewhere in that sealed vault may have been evidence of Allied vulnerabilities carried into the post-war intelligence infrastructure. The Black Vault itself became an obsession. In 1998, after Soviet withdrawal from Poland, independent archaeologists sought permission to re-examine the WWII site. Initial surveys using ground-penetrating radar revealed metallic anomalies beneath collapsed sections of the bunker. However, when excavation began, government authorities abruptly revoked access, citing environmental contamination. A year later, a brief Polish defense ministry statement confirmed the recovery of radioactive residues consistent with historical electronic components. No samples were released for independent testing. A journalist named Tomasz Wilczek, who had been following the case since the early 1990s, claimed to have obtained internal photographs from a former intelligence officer. He published them in a short-lived magazine, Historia Zastrzeżona. The images showed the Black Vault, its front melted inward, its hinges warped by heat. On its surface, barely legible beneath soot, were engraved words "Nur für Augen des Führers," for the Führer's eyes only. Within days of publication, Wilczek's office was burglarized, his archives set ablaze. He disappeared shortly thereafter, last seen boarding a night train from Wrocław to Prague. His photographs were never recovered. Rumors persist that the vault's contents were flown to Britain in the mid-1960s under the guise of cultural property restitution. Supporting this claim, a declassified RAF transport log from 1965 lists an unregistered cargo plane departing Krakow and landing at RAF Northolt under diplomatic exemption, carrying sealed scientific materials. The manifest bears the annotation, Unit 77, Ashfield Transfer. Whether the British government ever examined the materials or destroyed them is unknown. The files remain closed until 2065. In 2012, urban explorers rediscovered the bunker entrance, long overgrown by pine and moss. They documented flooded corridors and rusted signage, but noted that the main vault chamber appeared deliberately collapsed, the ceiling reinforced by post-war concrete. Among the debris lay a rusted film canister containing fragments of nitrate film. When digitized, the footage revealed blurred radio operators wearing SS uniforms, operating complex signal consoles, and a voice faintly audible in German. Message intercepted. Decryption successful. London source confirmed. The clip ends abruptly. Historians continue to debate the significance of Unit 77. Some argue it was merely an experimental communications hub, destroyed to prevent capture. Others believe it concealed evidence of espionage that reached into Allied command itself, proof that someone on the victorious side was feeding information to Berlin in the final months of the war. The Black Vault, wherever it now rests, remains sealed not only by metal and concrete, but by a silence shared among nations that prefer certain truths to remain buried. In a 2009 interview, retired Polish intelligence officer Andrzej Karwowski summarized the enigma succinctly. Every government that touched those files stopped digging. Perhaps they all found something inside that didn't fit the story we were told about the war's end. Today, the forest around WWII is quiet, its hills hollow with forgotten tunnels and unmarked entrances. On cold nights, radio enthusiasts claim to hear faint bursts of static on shortwave frequencies, repeating in rhythmic intervals. Some say it's interference from old transmitters corroded underground. Others believe it's the last whisper of Unit 77, still transmitting, still waiting for someone to decode its final message. The Second World War officially ended 80 years ago, yet its silence still hums beneath the modern world, buried in mountain vaults, locked under treaties, redacted behind stamps that read "Eyes Only." Each recovered document points not toward closure, but toward continuation. Convoys vanish. Signals persist. Files once sealed in the name of victory resurface as warnings. The war did not die. It changed its language. And as new archives open, another pattern begins to emerge. A chain linking the Alps, the Baltic, Geneva, Patagonia, and Silesia. Somewhere within that chain lies the reason every government still denies what they once found: that history's darkest secrets were never lost. They were inherited,